Hello, my friends, and welcome to Star Wars for 100 Days, the ultimate fan countdown leading up to the release of Star Wars The Force Awakens. Every single day, we're getting closer and closer to the release of the 7th chapter in the greatest sci-fi saga of all time. One of the most amazing things about the Star Wars universe are truly the amount of characters that actually exist there. Ones in the background, main characters, heroes, and villains. And it got me thinking, there really aren't that many villains in the Star Wars movies. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's thousands of frickin' stormtroopers, but when you really boil it down, you got Darth Vader, the Emperor, and to a lesser extent, Boba Fett. But that also leaves us with the most ruthless crime lord in the entire Star Wars universe, Jabba the Hutt. Not to be confused with Pizza the Hutt. He's delicious. That's right, Jabba the Hutt, one of the most notorious crime lords in all of Star Wars. This is a character who made his big debut originally in the 1983 classic Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And honestly, he's one of my favorite parts about that movie. Jabba the Hutt also just happens to be a marvel of practical effects, which no CG is honestly needed to bring this character to life. But it does take upwards of 8 to 10 different puppeteers working different parts of his body to make him seem so lifelike. The first time that I saw Jabba the Hutt, I honestly thought he was a real creature. He was one of the most realistic things that I'd ever seen. Keep in mind, I was a very young kid when I saw Return of the Jedi for the first time, but just the way the character moved, the way his eyes would react, the way his tongue would slowly slither out, licking the drool off of his chin, the way he would devour these weird little frog creatures, just his big bellowing laugh. This character was and still is one of the greatest special effects ever seen in film. And he also happens to be one hell of a character who was built up big time over the course of the original trilogies. So let me take you back in time. First, 1977, Star Wars. We're introduced to Han Solo and Chewbacca. Before they leave on their big journey with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, Han Solo is attacked by this bounty hunter who goes by the name of Greedo, who's working for this crime lord by the name of Jabba the Hutt. This is the very first instance in which we are actually told about this character. They were building up Jabba since the very beginning, and we never see him in the movie. Flash forward a couple years later, we're at The Empire Strikes Back. Again, Jabba is mentioned in passing, and at the very end, Han Solo is captured by Boba Fett and taken to Jabba's palace. Again, we don't see the character. The build-up to this guy is amazing because we know that he's had some issues with Han Solo in the past. And then in 1983, Return of the Jedi came along, and holy crap, it blew our minds. Originally, George Lucas and his team envisioned that Jabba the Hutt would be this big, fuzzy, furry creature, but over time, he evolved into this massive slug, frog-like looking being, which could barely move at all because of his massive girth. And that actually became one of the defining characteristics of his character, not to mention it completely demonstrated that this guy doesn't have time to move. He's running a giant crime organization, which does everything from smuggling to gun running, extortion, piracy, assassinations. Jabba the Hutt and his organization did it all. So by the time Return of the Jedi rolled around and you saw this guy, you knew not to mess with him. And he made that pretty clear. If you pissed him off, he'd straight up just feed you to his giant monster which lives right below his house. Jabba just so happens to also be an incredibly intimidating villain who will also recognize you if you happen to have the strength to confront him. The scene where Leia comes in and threatens to blow up everybody with a thermal detonator, or even when Luke Skywalker comes in literally threatening to destroy him, Jabba doesn't flinch. He's ready for anything the Jedi is going to throw at him, and I think that Jabba the Hutt is actually not susceptible to, like, force tricks or anything that's used by a Jedi, because I believe Luke tries to use them on him, but his powers aren't going to work. Then in 1997, George Lucas and his team released Star Wars The Special Edition, and we got a very big addition to the very first film, Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. There was this old footage of Han Solo talking to this human who supposedly was Jabba the Hutt, but the scene was cut entirely because they weren't ready for Jabba's design, and frankly, it just didn't work overall in the film itself. But now that everybody knows about Jabba, they felt this would be the perfect opportunity to go back to that scene and enhance it with some brand new special effects. And that's exactly what they did. They actually superimposed this CGI Jabba the Hutt over this human actor and made it seem as if he was actually interacting with Han Solo. Now, at the time, I thought it was really awesome. I thought it was really revolutionary that they could actually, like, take a CG effect, insert it into an old film, and make it seem like they just created this brand new scene. Unfortunately, that CG has not aged all that well, and if you take a look at the original special edition versions of the film, Jabba frankly just looks awful. He looks like a cartoon character, his color is all wrong, it just doesn't work. Then in 2004, they went back to the scene, redid it again, and made the CG look a little bit better, but it's still obviously just not the same Jabba that we saw from Return of the Jedi. He looked a little more similar, but I think his colors were off, and still the scene does just seem completely unnecessary, just to let us know that Jabba's there, and to give us a small glimpse of Boba Fett. He was also included in Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace as the guy who actually starts the pod race. He's basically the guest of honor. Everybody gets all excited when Jabba shows up. I especially love the way he starts the race because there's a gong right next to him, and instead of just hitting it, he decides to bite the head off of this creature and then spit it right at it. As Han Solo said, Jabba the Hutt is a slimy piece of worm-ridden filth. But honestly, that's the way I like that character. He's incredibly underhanded. He's like a more hardcore version of Don Vito Corleone. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Jabba the Hutt, there are a few options outside of the movies which I would highly recommend. If you really like comic books, I would definitely recommend checking out Jabba the Hutt, The Art of the Deal. Back in the early 90s, they actually had this Jabba the Hutt comic book series, which was all about him and his exploits, going to different planets, making new enemies, making new friends, and just all around being a big badass gangster. These stories are a lot of fun and truly demonstrate why Jabba the Hutt is one of the more interesting characters from the series, and certainly one that you don't want to mess with. I was actually looking through some of my old comic books and found one of them. This is it right here. This is Jabba the Hutt. This is the Gar Sapoon Hit. This is this amazing story where he actually goes to see another fellow crime lord and actually ends up getting him killed. I'm not going to say how that happens. All I know is check out these comics. They're a really great read and they expand on the characters greatly. Maybe we'll even get to see another extended member of his family. Maybe we'll get to see the return of the Hutts. Maybe they're pretty pissed off at Leia because she is the one who actually ended up killing Jabba the Hutt. And I'm sure by doing that, she probably made some pretty big enemies in the crime and underworld of the Star Wars universe. All I know is Jabba the Hutt is a fantastic character. He's one of my absolute favorite Star Wars characters who has a lot of memorable dialogue. And that's saying a lot because he is speaking in his native language, Huttese, the entire time. All I know is I'm never gonna forget that laugh. As far as a favorite scene from Jabba the Hutt, it is really hard to say. It's definitely a scene from Return of the Jedi, but he just has so many standout moments. But this is going to seem really random. I think my favorite scene from Jabba the Hutt is when Luke Skywalker actually arrives at Jabba's palace, and Jabba is taking this nap, and Bib Fortuna walks over and he wakes him up by poking him in the head, and Jabba the Hutt just gets up and makes this amazing noise. I don't know why, but every single time it always makes me crack up. The only thing that I don't think I really like about Jabba the Hutt is probably his court jester, Salicious Crumb. It's mostly just his annoying laugh. It's not Jar Jar bad, but it's still kind of annoying. One of the biggest crime threats in the galaxy, one of Han Solo's greatest enemies, and Boba Fett's greatest employer, Jabba the Hutt is one of the most memorable villains from the Star Wars universe, and is without a doubt one of the most iconic characters from the series. Before you guys leave today, please tell me what you think about the character of Jabba the Hutt. Do you like him in the movies and the spin-offs? How about the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series? He actually appears there a couple of times. Do you have a favorite Jabba the Hutt scene? Do you think that any of his family members are going to reappear in Star Wars The Force Awakens? And what do you want to see from that movie? Make sure to tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.
Oh, ho, 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 ho.